Hello, and welcome to the More Than Spanish podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Judge, and in this podcast, I normally interview a family or a couple or an individual who has successfully transitioned and adjusted to life in southern Spain. But in this episode, I'm going to talk about some of the typical questions that I get from my students of Spanish that helps them in day-to-day life of getting around Rota or El Puerto or Cádiz or really anywhere in Spain. And the questions I want to address first is, how in the world do you stand in line in a Spanish bank or in anywhere where there is no apparent line? How do you get somebody's attention, especially that waiter that you know has been seeing that you need some help or you want your check and he's paying no attention to you? How do you get his attention? And also, I get a lot of questions about typical restaurant expressions and vocabulary just to make the restaurant experience a little bit better. So I'm going to be addressing those areas in this short podcast. So how do you stand in line in a Spanish bank or at the market? Now, I remember my first time when I visited Spain back in 1993, and I went to a bank. And I remember walking in the door, and there were about 6 people hanging around. I don't know what you would call it. It wasn't a line, and it wasn't clear to me if there was a line. It was very random in my cultural thinking. There were about 2 or 3 people kind of against the back wall, standing in no apparent order. There was an older man sitting on a chair in kind of this waiting area, and then there was 1 or 2 other people around randomly. And I had no idea where the line finished. How do I even get help? So I stood there for a little bit, and sure enough, after a couple minutes, someone came in behind me, and then they said something, and then somebody else acknowledged it somehow. And then all of a sudden I realized I'd been bumped out of line. What just happened? Has that ever happened to you? Well, in Spain, they kind of force you to communicate. You know, in the United States, we know where the line finishes. We know where the line begins. We like order. We like this linear, everything's clear and clean. And we've got these ropes that show exactly where the line is going. We don't like people cutting in line. We get very nervous when things are kind of out of control. Spain, well, is different that way. It's just different. So how it works here is you got to ask a question. When you go into a bank or at the market, especially make sure that there's no, one of those little red machines with the numbers, or there's not a touch screen to get a number. I'm not talking about those situations, obviously. I like that when I see that. Hey, I'll grab a number and then I can just follow that. But when there's no number, you have to ask a question. So next time you go into the bank and you see that there is no apparent line, there is no number, you just say in Spanish, hey, who's the last in line? And how you would say that in Spanish is, ¿Quién es el último? So that's 4 words. ¿Quién, who, es, is, el, the, último, last. ¿Quién es el último? And that's basically asking, hey, who's the last in line? Now, somebody should acknowledge, somebody should look at you and say, yo. And then you eye that person, and you keep your eye on that person until that person is being helped. And then after that person leaves, and then the bank teller or wherever you are says, okay, siguiente. Siguiente means next. When they yell siguiente, you walk up and you get helped. So that's the basics of how to stand in line. Now, another question I get is, hey, how do I get somebody's attention? I'm at Decathlon, and I want to ask a question where something is. I'm at Macro, wherever you are. I'm at a restaurant. That waiter, he keeps whizzing by me. How do I get him to acknowledge me? How do I get his attention? Well, there's one easy word in Spanish, and it's simply disculpa. That's spelled D-I-S-C-U-L-P-A. And so pronounce it in Spanish. Don't pronounce it in English, disculpa. No, it's D. The I's in Spanish are a really long E sound, so it's disculpa. And say it with a little bit of boldness, a little bit of confidence, and then the person will know that you are trying to get their attention. And if you want, you can also say, hey, disculpa, señor, or disculpa, señora. And then your waiter will finally come to you. Now, the last thing I want to give you, which is a little bit of a longer section here, but I think will be very helpful for the next time you go to a restaurant. So first of all, you walk into the restaurant and they might try to help you out in English because they see that you're American or you're foreign because, well, how do they know? Well, it's more obvious than you'd realize. Most of the time it's by how you dress and what you're wearing, or just even how you walk into the restaurant. Body language shows your culture. So when you walk into a restaurant, what's the first thing you can say about what you want? You want a table for four, or you want to sit outside, you want to sit inside. Hey, do you have the menu in English? So let me give you some expressions here. And I want to just give you the expressions, not the whole sentence, just to make your life a little bit easier. So you walk in with your family, there's four of you. As soon as you see a waiter or the host there or hostess, you say, una mesa para cuatro. And if you want to be a little polite, add that por favor at the end. Una mesa para cuatro, por favor. Okay, so let me break that down if you didn't catch all those words. Una, a, mesa, table, para, for, cuatro, four people, or whatever number it is. Well, let's say that they have an outdoor seating area and you want to sit outside. So if you want to say, hey, I want a table outside, you say, una mesa afuera, por favor. Or if you don't want to sit outside, you say adentro, inside. So you would say una mesa adentro, por favor. And if they do not bring you a menu in English, so how do you ask for a menu in English? You would simply say, ¿Tienes la carta en inglés? So let me break that down. Your first word is tienes, do you have? La carta, the menu, en inglés, in English. And then obviously they'll give you an answer. If they have it, they'll bring it. Now, I know a couple who, when they arrived to Spain for the first time, they didn't know any Spanish, and they didn't know a very, very critical component of going to a restaurant, which is you have to ask for the bill. Now, in the United States, they'll bring it to you whether you ask or not. Because why? They're trying to get you out. They're trying to turn the table. They're trying to get another group at your table so that their tips increase. Well, here in Spain, it's completely different. They're not trying to turn your table. They don't expect you to rush. I assume that the Spanish waiters have had many conversations in the kitchen about how quickly the Americans come and go. So there is no hurry here. But you got to ask for the bill. They will never, ever bring it to you unless you ask. It's considered rude for a waiter to bring the bill to you without you asking first. So how can you ask for the bill? Well, it's pretty easy. You can simply say, la cuenta. Or, if you want to be more polite, la cuenta, por favor. Or you could say, me cobras, which is basically saying, charge me, which I know sounds a little weird. So back to that couple that I met, and when they first arrived to Spain, they wanted to have a meal the Spanish way. So they arrived at the restaurant on a Friday night at about 9:30, and well, there weren't that many people there yet because, it doesn't get hopping until around 10:30. They were there for a couple hours. They took their time. It was past midnight at this point. They were ready to go home, and they were waiting. And they started to wait even more. And they were waiting even more. Finally, the wife, she was just irritated. Hey, what's with this guy? He just keeps going back and forth from the kitchen to serving the other tables. He sees we're done. What's his deal? Well, his deal is he's being polite. So she finally stood up, making these gestures of putting on her coat, making it obvious that, hey, dude, we are done. And he still didn't bring the bill. Well, finally, they tried to hack out some Spanish and they made some gestures. The guy got it and he brought the bill. They left that with kind of a frustration, but that's life. That's how you learn. You learn from experiences, whether it's positive or negative. So the next time you go to a restaurant, ask for the bill. So these are my 3 tips. First is, how do you stand in line? ¿Quién es el último? How do you get somebody's attention? Simply by saying disculpa. And finally, some restaurant expressions about getting a table, sitting inside, sitting outside, or if you want, how to get the bill. As I wrap up this podcast, I want to give you some information about a new beginner class for adults that we have starting on May 3rd. So obviously, if you listen to this podcast after May 3rd, we will have other groups coming in the future. But if you hear this before May 3rd, 2017, you're still in time to join our group for beginners. Now, I know what you're thinking. Another boring Spanish class. I can't get those verb conjugations down in Spanish. There's just so many of them. Or maybe you've said, I've tried 100 times and I still can't get a sentence out of my mouth. Now, if that's what you're thinking, then I believe I can help you. I was just like you. I studied 4 years of high school Spanish back in Ohio and 4 years in college. I'm embarrassed to admit that I even majored in Spanish in college. But you know what? After 8 years, I really couldn't get out sentences that well. I was still conjugating in my head. You know that situation where you want to say, they talk, and then you're going through those verb tenses just like they taught you. You remember that order they would teach you? Yo, tú, él, ella, usted, nosotros, vosotros, ellos, ellas, ustedes. And then you had to go through all 6 of those conjugations to get to the last one to be able to say, ellos hablan. And then so you're going through your head thinking, sí, okay, yo hablo, tú hablas, él habla. Nosotros hablamos, vosotros habláis, y ellos hablan. And it would take you about 8 seconds to get one verb conjugation. Well, after 8 years of studying Spanish, that's kind of where I was. And I'm embarrassed to admit that. But learning, I would say, the poor way, or learning from classes that didn't really focus on getting the Spanish out of my mouth, has helped me a lot to reverse engineer the Spanish grammar. And I really believe that I can help you with those frustrations, especially with verb conjugations. So by reverse engineering these verb conjugations, I can present them in a way to you that is so broken down and present it in a way that really fits your English-speaking mindset, that I really know that I can get you speaking in full sentences from day 1 of the class. The class will start on Wednesday, May 3rd, and meet for 5 weeks, 10 sessions total, so that's 15 contact hours, from May 3rd until June 5th. It will be from 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m., and the location will be very convenient. More Than Spanish has offices near El Paseo, but this class will be hosted by a Navy family that lives in El Ancla, so it's about 2 blocks away from Bailey's. Now, I've got a few spaces left, so send me an email. You can send me an email or Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp, or you can call me for registration information. So my email is Jeff, that's Jeff, at morethanspanish.es, or my telephone number for WhatsApp or to call me is 676-692-571. If you want to check out more about us, then you can check our Facebook page at facebook.com/morethanspanish.es. Or if you want to find out more about my professional and educational background, you can check me at LinkedIn. That's LinkedIn, LinkedIn.com/IN/Jeff, that's Jeff, dash Judge, Judge. So I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. And if you have any specific questions about the language or the culture, send me a message and I'd be glad to include those in a future podcast. Learning Spanish is a process, it's a journey, but I really believe that you can gain some confidence and competence to make your life more enjoyable as you live here in southern Spain. Have a great day, and don't be afraid to get out there and enjoy your life in Spain.